Today, I'm going to tell you a story so intense it split two worlds apart, unfolding in the raw, unforgiving heart of the American frontier. This is where snow-covered streets meet old grudges, and where fate waits patiently in the shadows for the right moment to strike. It started with a winter ball, polite music, careful smiles, and one unexpected encounter that set destiny back into motion. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The winter of 1814 settled over Santa Fe like a soft-spoken lie, gentle on the surface, merciless beneath it. Snow drifted down in slow, spiraling veils through the sharp December air, settling over adobe walls and timbered roofs, laying a clean white mask over the territorial capital. Everything looked untouched, innocent. Lark Thistle had lived long enough to know better than to trust beauty that came so easily. She stood at the tall window of her room in the governor's residence, fingertips resting against the icy pane, watching the plaza below turn into something almost unreal. Lanterns stretched from building to building, their warm glow breaking the gray dusk into pockets of gold. Near the gazebo, musicians gathered, polishing brass and tuning strings. Tonight was the winter ball, the season's grand display of refinement, a declaration that civilization had roots here, even if the newspapers back east still called this land wild and unfinished. "Miss Lark, your mother is asking for you." Nona's voice carried gently from the doorway. Lark turned away from the window, smoothing the pale blue morning dress she wore. "Tell her I'll be down shortly." Nona didn't move. The older woman had been with the Thistle family since their arrival 3 years earlier, and had watched Lark change from a quiet, hollow-eyed girl into the composed young woman everyone admired now. "You've been staring out that window near an hour," Nona said softly. "What do you see out there?" "Everything I've spent years trying to forget," Lark thought. Instead, she gave the polished smile she'd learned to wear like armor. "Just the snow. It's pretty," Nona murmured, though the sound in her throat carried doubt as much as agreement. "Your mother has invited Rig Varnell to escort you tonight. She says he's quite taken with you." Rig Varnell. Handsome. Well-placed. Predictable in every safe way. The sort of man Maudra Thistle had been lining up for her ever since they reached this territory. The kind who would never ask about the missing year. The one spent far from Boston. The one never spoken of. The one that had broken and remade her. "How lovely," Lark said, her voice empty. After Nona left, she returned to the window. Snow fell thicker now, and she rested her forehead against the glass, letting the cold sink into her skin. 4 years. 4 years since the wagon train. Since the attack that scattered them across the New Mexico desert. Since she'd been left alone in a land that devoured the weak. Since him. She closed her eyes, and he was there. Sharp and immediate, as if time had failed to dull him at all. Tuzum. Even thinking his name felt like handling fire. A secret buried so deep she sometimes convinced herself he'd been nothing more than a fevered dream. He had moved through the desert like he belonged to it. Tall, powerful, all sinew and quiet awareness. Eyes the color of dark amber that had once measured her with suspicion, then curiosity, then something far more dangerous. The Apache warrior who saved her life, who taught her how to live, who once told her, as the desert burned gold beneath the setting sun, "You see beauty where others see only death." That is rare. He had touched her with a gentleness that made her forget they were meant to be enemies, loved her fully, fiercely, impossibly, for 3 months that felt like an entire lifetime. And she had left him behind when her father's rescue party finally found her, because she'd been young, frightened, and convinced their love could not survive the real world. Lark opened her eyes, her breath fogging the glass. She had believed time would erase him, that the dinners, the dances, the endless parade of suitable men would eventually bury those memories. But 4 years later, she still woke with the phantom feel of desert wind on her skin, still heard his voice in the quiet, still felt the echo of his hands in her hair. He had called her my beautiful one. She'd understood enough of his language to know what it meant. The words had branded her heart. Lark. Maudra Thistle's voice rose sharply from the stairs below. We have much to prepare. Lark straightened, gathering herself with practiced precision. She was Maudra Thistle's daughter now, poised, proper, and perfectly civilized. The girl who had loved an Apache warrior beneath an open sky was supposed to be gone. The girl who had once loved an Apache warrior beneath the open sky, that, Lark told herself, had been nothing but a fever dream, a reckless spell born of fear, hunger, and the wild loneliness of the desert. A chapter she'd locked away deep inside. Tonight, she would dance with Rig Varnell. She would smile sweetly, play her part, and be exactly who everyone expected her to be. And she would not, under any circumstance, think about amber eyes and rough hands that had once touched her like she was something sacred. She would not recall a voice that had made her name sound like a hymn. Outside, the snowfall thickened. Santa Fe, wrapped in white and lantern light, looked like a place spun from myth. At the far edge of the plaza, in the shadows just beyond the reach of firelight, Tazem stood like a stone figure chiseled from the land itself. Still, silent, watching. He didn't belong here. Every instinct in him screamed to vanish into the hills, back to the high places where men didn't wear masks and the wind didn't lie. But the rumors had found him, carried by passing traders and tongues too loose with whiskey, whispers that the Thistle family had taken root here in Santa Fe, that their daughter, the one with hair like summer wheat and eyes that could undo him, had become the crown jewel of society. He had told himself he just needed to see her. Just once. Make sure she was alive, well, happy. Then he could close the door for good. Stop reaching for a ghost in the dead of night. 3 months. That was all they'd had. 3 months in the summer of 1810 when she'd stumbled into his life, sunburned, bone-tired, trembling from thirst and fear, after her wagon train had been torn apart by raiders. He'd been tracking the same men. When he found her huddled among the rocks, barely clinging to breath, his first thought had been to walk away. White settlers brought soldiers, and soldiers brought death. But then she looked up. Those green eyes, like spring grass after a hard rain, held something that twisted his chest. He'd meant to take her to the nearest town, a day's ride, maybe 2, but the desert was crawling with Comanche that summer, and every road was danger. 1 day became 3, then a week. Somewhere along the way, she stopped being a stranger. She became Lark. She was 17, soft-palmed, finely schooled, utterly unequipped for that world, but braver than she knew. She listened, learned. She moved quiet as a shadow, found water where there should have been none, read the land like a page. At night, beside flickering fires that barely chased back the dark, she spoke to him. Not at him, like most white folks did. She asked about his people, about his mother, Shaya, who had taught him to track by watching how spiders wove their webs, about his little sister who died coughing blood, brought by white men's sickness, about how the land was being carved up like a carcass, and what it felt like to watch everything he'd ever known slip away. And when she spoke of her world, it was no less tragic. A mother who saw her as decoration, a father whose approval was a mirage, a city back east that looked polished on the outside, but felt like a cage. "Sometimes I think I was meant to be lost," she'd whispered, "so I could finally become myself." It happened slow, then all at once. A hand lingering too long, a glance that held too much. And then, one night beneath a sky scattered with stars like diamonds on black velvet, he reached for her, and she came willingly. They made love like people trying to etch each other into memory, like time itself was closing in on them. And when she curled against him, tracing old scars on his chest with quiet fingers, he knew, without a sliver of doubt, he would never love anyone else like this. "I love you," she'd said. Clear, steady, no shame in it. "I know I shouldn't. I know it's madness. But I do." "Are you a Noshni?" he whispered back, the Apache words thick on his tongue. "I love you beyond words, and Lord help him, he meant it." For 3 months, they carved out a life that didn't belong to anyone but them. He showed her the secret places, the canyon overrun with wildflowers, the spring-fed pool so clear you could count every stone, the mesa where you could see forever in every direction. They laughed, they lived, they loved with the desperation of people who knew the world wouldn't let it last. And it didn't. When her father's search party finally found them, she wept. "Come with me," she pleaded. "We'll find a way. They'll see." But he knew better. He'd seen what happened when his people trusted promises written in ink and lies, and he'd seen fear in her eyes, not fear of him, but fear of what loving him would cost, her family, her place, her entire world. "Go," he told her. "Find a good man, stay safe." "I'll never forget you," she cried. "Forget me," he said, forcing each word through a throat full of fire. This was a dream. "Wake up." He vanished into the desert before the soldiers could lay eyes on him, carrying the sound of her crying like a scar in his soul. It had to be better this way. Cleaner. She'd heal. She'd forget. She'd build something solid and safe. He believed that, for 4 years. Until tonight. Until whispers brought him to this snow-laced plaza, bathed in golden lantern light, and he saw her again. Lark thistle. And everything he'd tried to bury clawed its way back to life. Lantern light painted golden halos across the snow-covered plaza. Tazem told himself he only came to see her. Just once. Just to know she was safe. Happy. Settled. Then he could fade like a ghost into the cold. Music rose, violins and guitars braided into a waltz, and townsfolk drifted toward the center of the square. Couples spun into place for the first dance of the evening. Tazem scanned the crowd, his jaw tight, hoping and dreading in equal measure. And then, there she was. She stepped out from the governor's residence like some untouchable creature from another world. A vision in white silk that turned firelight into gold. Her golden hair, pinned up in an elegant twist he didn't have a name for, was laced with tiny white blossoms. Elbow-length gloves hugged her arms, and pearls sat perfect and cold against her neck. She didn't look like the girl who'd once bled and cried in his arms. She looked like she belonged to this new world. Polished, polite, unreachable. She looked like she'd forgotten him. A man in uniform, tall, dark, certain of his place, stepped forward and took her hand. She smiled. That same practiced smile he'd seen her wear in the courts of her old life. And she let the man lead her into the dance. The music swelled. They moved together, poised, flawless, as if the rhythms of civilization had claimed her completely. Tazem felt something inside him snap. This was what he wanted for her, wasn't it? Safety, belonging, a life without hunger or fear. Then why did watching her smile at another man feel like being gutted? He should walk away, slip back into the dark like he was never here. Let this be proof, final and absolute, that she'd moved on. That their time had been a passing dream for her, too. But then, the dance ended. The officer offered his arm, gesturing towards the refreshment tables. She hesitated. Her smile trembled. She shook her head. The man tried to coax her, confused, but she was already stepping away, alone, toward the edge of the dancing square. Another song began, slower, aching, full of the kind of longing that made even strong men stare at their boots. Lark didn't return to her escort. She stood still, eyes raised toward the falling snow. Tazim watched, rooted in place, as her expression shifted. The mask slipped. In its place, rawness, honesty, memory. She closed her eyes, and then she danced. Not the stiff, rehearsed patterns of the ballroom. No. This was something born of bone and memory, wild and wordless. She moved like she was remembering how to feel. Her arms lifted, her dress swirled like river foam around her. Snow caught in her hair and on her bare shoulders. She spun again, faster, and for a breathless moment, she was the girl he remembered. The girl who had once danced barefoot beneath a desert sunset. The one who laughed like the world couldn't touch her, and that was when he knew. She hadn't forgotten. Not any more than he had. The truth hit him like a fist to the ribs. 4 years of telling himself she'd let go. That she belonged here, in a world of pearls and white gloves. That she'd buried him like a bad dream. But here she was, dancing alone in the snow, trying to shake off the weight of everything that caged her. And her face, it held the same grief, the same yearning that had hollowed him out all these years. She remembers. The music swelled. Lark spun again. Fiercer. Freer. Her steps wilder now, desperate even, and then she opened her eyes. She looked directly at him. Time slammed to a halt, across the plaza, through the veil of snow, past twirling couples and glittering laughter and all the things meant to keep them apart. She saw him. Their eyes locked. And in that blink of eternity, 4 years shattered. Shock, disbelief, joy, fear. It all danced across her face like firelight on water. Her hand flew to her throat. Her lips parted. She shaped his name, but no sound came. Color drained from her cheeks, then surged back, blooming red with emotion. She took a step, toward him, instinctive, unthinking, then stopped, frozen. She trembled like a willow in a winter storm. And Tazim. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only watch her see him. Watch her come apart and fall back together in a single breath. You didn't forget, he thought, every heartbeat in his chest echoing the truth. And neither did I. Exhilaration tore through her chest like a lightning strike. Around them, the town spun on. Dancers twirling, laughter rising, couples caught up in their own little stories. But between Tazim and Lark Thistle, the world shrank down to a silence that roared. Just them. No past. No future. Just the truth that 4 years of pretending couldn't bury. Snow thickened, flakes catching firelight like tiny falling stars. Across the plaza, Lark stood motionless in her white dress, staring at the ghost of her past made flesh, every beat of her heart threatening to tear her apart. She couldn't breathe. This couldn't be happening. She had to be imagining him, pulling his face from the ashes of memory, mistaking the ache in her chest for something real. Because Tazim couldn't be here. Not in Santa Fe, not at this polished, proper winter ball, but he was. He stood at the edge of the square, half in shadow, tall and unshakable, like something carved out of the same stone as the Sangre de Cristos. He wore no uniform, no feathers or war paint, just dark pants, a rough leather vest, a presence that turned heads without even trying. And for her, he might have been the only soul alive. Her eyes drank in every detail, the proud square of his shoulders, the hard angles of his jaw, the way he held himself, still, restrained, yet ready to ignite. It was him, older now, rougher, but still him. 4 years. 4 years of trying to believe she'd made the right call, letting go of a love born in dust and danger. 4 years of letting Madra dress her like a porcelain doll, of being trotted out like a showpiece at functions, of smiling until her face ached, of playing the good daughter. 4 years of lies. And the moment their eyes met, the whole damn house of cards came crashing down. Her heart slammed into her ribs so hard she thought she might faint. Heat rushed through her veins. Every nerve screamed his name, like she was a compass, and he was true north. Her feet moved before her mind could stop them. One step, then another. She would have walked into fire if it led to him. Rules, time, society, none of it mattered. Lark, a voice broke through like a rifle crack. Captain Rig Varnell. She jerked her head away from Tazim like it hurt. The officer was at her elbow, handsome as ever, brow creased with concern. "Miss Thistle," he said gently, "are you quite all right? You've gone pale." Yes, she stammered. "It's just the cold, I think. I felt dizzy for a moment." "I'll fetch you some wine." His hand was already moving toward her arm. Gallant, polite, so wrong. "No." It came out sharper than she meant. She forced a soft smile. I think I need some air. Just a bit of quiet, if you don't mind." Before he could offer more help, or more questions, she gathered her skirts and slipped away. Heart pounding so loud, she was sure the fiddlers could hear it over the music. She didn't dare glance back. Couldn't, not with so many eyes around. But everything in her screamed to run to him. What would she even say, after everything? After choosing blood over love? Silence over truth? She didn't know. Still, her feet led her toward the far side of the plaza, where 2 old adobe buildings opened into a narrow alley cloaked in shadow. There, under the veil of winter's hush, she let herself stop. She leaned against the wall, pressing a gloved hand to her chest like it could hold her heart in place. Her breath came in ragged puffs, each one fogging in the freezing air. Tazim is here. He's alive. He saw me, and the look he gave her, like a man dying of thirst who just saw water. That told her more than words ever could. Footsteps crunched behind her. Lark spun around, and there he was. Up close, he was both exactly as she remembered, and hauntingly changed. Same proud jaw, same wild, searching eyes, same air that pulled all breath from a room. But now, there were new lines on his face, shadows behind those eyes. And still, he looked at her like she was the only light left in the world. There were new lines around his eyes now, a tighter set to his jaw. A quiet edge in his gaze that hadn't been there before, like he'd seen too much, lived through storms she'd never understand. They stared at each other, silent as the snow drifted between them. Somewhere far behind, the music still played, but it felt like it belonged to another life. Lark's lips parted, then closed. There were 1,000 things she wanted to say, but none would come. It was Tazim who finally broke the silence, his voice low and rough, like it hadn't been used in days. "You still dance like you're free." The words hit her like a blow. She let out a choked sound, half a laugh, half a sob. "I'm not," she whispered. "I haven't been free since..." Since I left you. Since I chose safety over love. Since I made the worst mistake of my life. He stepped closer. She could smell him. Leather, smoke, sage, and that wild scent that was his alone. It made her dizzy with memory. You look... He paused. Swallowed. You look like you belong here. I don't. The words rushed out before she could stop them. I don't belong anywhere. I haven't belonged since... Don't. His voice cracked like a whip. Don't say it. Don't make this harder. Harder than what? Her eyes burned. Harder than spending 4 years trying to forget you? Harder than pretending to care about men who bored me to tears, while remembering how you used to make me laugh? Harder than waking in a feather bed every morning, wishing I was sleeping on the hard earth with your arms around me? His face twisted with something. Pain, fury, maybe even hope. You made your choice, he said. You walked away. I was scared, she cried. 17 and scared out of my mind. I thought what we had wasn't possible. I thought I was protecting us both. Tazem's gaze locked onto hers. And now? Are you still scared? She looked at him. Really looked at him. At the man who had once seen her clearer than anyone else, who had held her through nightmares and kissed the bruises the world left behind. The man who'd loved her with such fire, no one after him ever stood a chance. I'm terrified, she whispered. But not of the same things anymore. He reached for her slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek so gently she thought she'd fall apart. He wiped a tear she hadn't known was there. She, Nijani, he murmured, the Apache words soft like a blessing. I tried to forget you, he said. Tried for 4 damn years. But you're in every sunrise, every wind on my skin. You're the ghost I haven't been able to outrun. Then stop running. Lark pressed her hand over his, holding it against her face. Please, I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend you're not real. I can't marry some proper man and live some lie of a life, not when my heart's been yours since the first time you looked at me like I was worth saving. Lark! Her name on his lips was both a prayer and a curse. You know our worlds don't touch, he said, voice breaking. They never have. They're touching right now. She stepped in, closing the space between them. And they did, back then, for 3 whole months. His hand found her waist, fingers grazing the silk of her dress like he couldn't stop himself. And what then? He said. You go back to your ballroom, and I vanish into the hills? We steal moments in the dark while you play the perfect lady and I watch from the shadows? I don't know, she cried. I don't have answers, Tazem. All I know is seeing you tonight. It's like I've been holding my breath for 4 years, and I'm finally breathing again. Tazem pulled her into his arms, and Lark buried her face against his chest, inhaling him. Solid, warm, real. His arms wrapped around her, strong and certain, and for the first time in 4 years, she felt like she'd come home. I never stopped loving you, he said into her hair. Not for a single day. She pulled back just enough to see his face, her fists clutching his shirt. Then let's make it enough, she said. We figure it out, together. Please, Tazem, don't walk away again. I won't survive it twice. He looked down at her, and she saw the war in his eyes, desire and duty, hope and heartbreak, past and future, tearing him in two. The air between them was thick with the weight of what they might lose. Snow drifted down around them, soft and steady, blanketing the world in a hush that made everything else disappear. Just the two of them remained, breathing the same cold air, hearts thudding in the quiet. Miss Thistle! Maudra's voice sliced through the stillness like a blade. Lark, where are you? They sprang apart. Too late. Lark's cheeks were stained with tears, her hair tangled, her dress crumpled where Tazem's hands had clutched her. She looked every bit the woman who'd just been kissed, like she was the only thing that mattered in the world, and there was no hiding it. In the dark, Tazem reached for her hand, squeezed once. "Meet me," he whispered. "Tomorrow, the old mission ruins, north of town, at dawn." "I'll be there," she breathed. And then he was gone, swallowed by the night like a spirit, as if he'd never been there at all. Lark pressed her hands to her burning cheeks, tried to steady her breath. Then she stepped out from the alley, bracing herself for her mother's stare and the questions that would surely come. But through all her swirling thoughts, one thing stood clear. She was done running, done pretending. Whatever came next, scandal, exile, heartbreak, or redemption, she'd face it. But she'd face it with him. The snow kept falling, soft and stubborn. Somewhere in the shadows, Tazem stood watching the distant glow from the plaza. His chest ached with something wild and unfamiliar. Hope. Dawn broke cold and gray, the sky as dull as tarnished pewter. Lark stood at her bedroom window, already dressed in her riding habit, a dark green wool coat that Madra always said was too plain. But Lark didn't care about fashion this morning. She hadn't slept. How could she? The confrontation with her mother had been sharp, but short. Madra had seen the blotchy face, the trembling hands, and knew something had happened. Lark had blamed it on illness, fatigue, women's troubles, and Madra, perhaps sensing that pushing too hard might cause something to splinter, let it go. For now. But Rig Varnell had been another matter. He'd sought her out before leaving, concern etched across his handsome features. "I hope I didn't offend you, Miss Thistle. If I was too forward—" "No," she'd told him, forcing a smile that felt brittle. "You were perfectly gentlemanly. I simply wasn't feeling well." He'd accepted it, but his eyes had been uncertain. "May I call on you tomorrow, just to be sure you've recovered?" She made some vague excuse, knowing full well she wouldn't be here, knowing by tomorrow everything might be different. Now, as the first hints of light brightened the eastern sky, Lark moved quickly, efficiently. She plaited her hair into a simple braid, wrapped herself in her thickest cloak, pulled on her sturdy boots. The house was still. No footsteps, no voices. The servants hadn't stirred, and her parents were still deep in sleep. She slipped through the quiet halls like a shadow, every creaking board making her flinch. The stables were cold and silent. Her mare, Duchess, greeted her with a soft nicker. Lark saddled her swiftly, her fingers moving with the muscle memory Tazem had taught her years ago. "Always check the girth twice. Loose saddle'll kill you quicker than any bullet." The thought of him made her hands tremble. Was she really doing this? Sneaking out to meet him? Risking her reputation, her family's name, her entire future, for a few stolen hours? Yes, she was. Because going back to that shallow life, the performance, the lies, was no longer possible. Not after last night. She led Duchess from the stable, mounted, and rode toward the old mission ruins as the first rays of sunlight stretched over the mountains. Tazem had been there long before dawn. He stood still among the crumbling stones, the weight of the world in his chest. Every second was agony. She won't come. Why would she? In the harsh clarity of morning, last night felt like a dream. A mad, impossible dream. She'd remember her warm bed, her polished life, the pressure from folks like Silas Thistle, the fear. She wouldn't come, of course not. She'd stay safe behind adobe walls, and he would disappear again. But still. He waited. Some truths cut deeper than a blade, and Tazem knew this one by heart. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. But even with that truth gnawing at him, he stayed. He couldn't tear his eyes from the trail stretching north out of Santa Fe, watching, waiting for the impossible. The old mission ruins were a favorite of daydreamers and painters, crumbling adobe walls choked by dry brush, a bell tower leaning like it might finally fall. What once stood proud as a Spanish outpost now whispered of abandonment and ghosts. But to Tazem, it symbolized something else entirely: the arrogance of empires, the folly of trying to tame land that never asked for chains. He had spent the whole night wrestling between hope and despair. He'd replayed everything: her face when she saw him, the tears sliding down her cheeks, how her body had trembled under his touch, like she'd been hit by lightning. He could still hear her voice. "I'll be there." But he'd also seen her in that white dress, dancing with Rig Varnell, adorned in pearls, flowers woven into her hair, floating through that elegant crowd like she belonged to a world he'd never be welcome in. She moved with grace, with privilege. And what could he offer her, really? A life on the run. Dirt trails and cold fires, hunger, danger, and always looking over their shoulders. A sound snapped him from the spiral. Hoofbeats. He turned, heart clenching. There she was, a lone rider in dark green wool, her figure sharp against the pale light of morning. His chest tightened as she approached the clearing. She came. Tazem stepped from behind the broken stone archway just as Lark Thistle reined in. Without hesitation, she dismounted, skirts brushing her boots. For a long second, they only stared at each other, neither speaking, both needing to believe this moment was real. Then she rushed into his arms. He caught her mid-step, lifting her off the ground, holding her like he never wanted to let go again. They clung to each other like survivors of some shipwreck who'd just found solid land. "You came," Tazem whispered into her hair. "I didn't think—" "Of course I came!" She cut him off fiercely, pulling back just enough to see his face. Her green eyes burned with fire. "Did you really think I wouldn't?" "I thought—" His fingers brushed her cheek, needing to know she was real. "I thought morning might bring clarity. That you'd remember all the reasons we can't do this." "I do remember," she said. Her gloved hands framed his face. "I just don't care anymore." She looked at him like she had nothing left to lose. "I've spent 4 years doing what was proper, what was expected, and I've hated every second of it." Tazem brushed his thumb over her lower lip, and she trembled. "Your mother's going to fight this," he murmured. "Your father. He'll be furious. You could lose everything." "I already did," she said, her voice cracking. "I lost the only thing that mattered when I let you go. Everything else, it's just lace and paint." He wanted to kiss her, God. He wanted to, but truth hung heavy between them. There were things that couldn't go unsaid. "Lark," he began, "if we do this, if we really do this, there's no going back. Your family might cut you off. Society will slam every door in your face, and my people—" She touched his chest gently. "Your people. What?" Tazem's throat closed around the words. "We're scattered," he forced out. "Hunted. We have no safety, no land to call ours. The life I can offer you, it's nothing like what you know. We'd have to leave this place. Head west maybe, or north into the mountains. Always moving. Never truly safe. You'd be giving up comfort, security, everything you've ever had." "I lived 3 months with you in the desert," Lark said quietly. "I remember the heat, the cold, the sand in everything. I also remember laughing so hard I couldn't breathe. I remember peace." "I know what that life looks like," Lark whispered. "And I also know I was happier sleeping beside you on hard dirt than I've ever been in any featherbed since." "You were younger then," Tazem said, voice low and pained. It felt like an adventure, But this would be forever. Good, she replied, and kissed him, soft but certain. Forever is exactly what I want. A groan tore from his chest, the dam of his control finally breaking. Tazem kissed her back with every ache he'd carried for 4 long years. His fingers found the end of her braid, pulling her close until no space remained between them. She tasted like snow, like tears, like coming home. He'd forgotten how she fit against him so perfectly, how even her sighs sounded like music. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and flushed, the sun had climbed high, casting golden light over the old mission ruins, bathing them in hues of rose and fire. "We need a plan," Tazem said, forehead still resting against hers. "We can't just run blind. Your father will send men after you. There are soldiers who know my face. Bounty hunters wouldn't blink before turning me in." Lark nodded, her mind already shifting to practicalities. "My folks are throwing a dinner party in 3 days. The house will be packed. I can slip out in the noise and confusion. Pack a few things. Take money from my account." "No." Tazem's voice cut firm and sharp. "Nothing traceable. Nothing they can use to track us or drag you back. Clothes, yes, but not a cent from your account. They'll follow the trail." "Then how?" she asked. "I've got some money," he said. "Not much, but enough to get us north. Been saving. Trading." He didn't mention the truth, that every dollar had been stashed away for the impossible dream of this moment. That maybe, just maybe, she'd come back to him one day. Lark looked at him with a softened gaze, as though she understood all the words he hadn't said. 3 days, she whispered. "I can make it through 3 more days pretending." "Can you?" He studied her face, the features he'd carried in his soul for years. "Once you walk into that house again, it'll try to hold you. Your mom'll work on you. That captain will press his claim. It'd be easy to tell yourself this is madness." "I won't change my mind," she said. Her voice was velvet, but her eyes were steel. "I wasted 4 years, Tazem. I'm not wasting 1 more day. Just 3 more days to say goodbye to the life I'm supposed to want. And then I'm yours. If you'll have me." "If I'll have you?" He let out a rough laugh. "Lark, you've lived in my every thought for 4 years. You're in every damn breath I take. Having you, that ain't the question. Keeping you safe, keeping you happy, that's what scares me." She placed both hands on his face, forcing him to look at her. "Then be scared with me," she whispered. "That's what love is, isn't it? Choosing to be brave together, even when we're terrified." He kissed her again. Slower this time, as if trying to etch the memory into his bones. The way her lips moved with his, the small sound in her throat, the way her fingers fisted in his shirt like she feared he might vanish. When they finally broke apart, the sun was high overhead. Lark would have to return before anyone noticed she was gone. 3 days, she said again as she mounted Duchess. "Where should I meet you?" "Here, at dawn. Pack light. We'll need to move quick." He caught her hand before she turned to go. "Lark, are you sure? Truly sure? 'Cause once we do this, there's no undoing it." She looked down at him from the saddle, and her smile, warm and real, was the first he'd seen since that cursed night at the ball. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," she said. "I'll see you in 3 days, my heart." Then she turned and rode off, and Tazem stood still, watching until she vanished from sight, his chest pounding with a dangerous mix of fear and hope. 3 days. 3 days to prepare. To gather everything they'd need. To brace for the storm he knew was coming the moment her family realized she was gone. As he turned back toward the camp nestled in the foothills, one thought rang louder than the rest. After 4 years, after all the pain and reasons to stay apart, she was choosing him, and he'd spend the rest of his life proving she'd been right to do it. "Out riding at dawn, Miss Lark? That's not like you," Madra Thistle remarked, raising an eyebrow. "I couldn't sleep," Lark answered smoothly, slipping off her gloves. "The cold air helped clear my head." Madra gave her a long, skeptical look, but let it go. Instead, she launched straight into the day's agenda: dress fittings, social calls, arrangements for the dinner party. Lark nodded along, pretending to listen while her mind spun with plans far beyond guest lists and satin gowns. That afternoon, Rig Varnell arrived as expected. Lark received him in the front parlor, painfully aware of her mother lurking just out of sight like a hawk circling overhead. Rig was everything a man was supposed to be: handsome, polished, well-spoken, but Lark felt not even the faintest stir of warmth. "I'd be honored if you let me escort you to the Christmas Eve service," he said, his dark eyes full of hope. "That's very kind of you," Lark replied, voice even, non-committal. "I find myself quite taken with you, Miss Thistle." He reached for her hand, and it took every ounce of restraint not to recoil. "I know our time's been short, but I hope you feel something too." This was the moment. She should have spoken plainly, drawn the line. But Madra's presence hung in the room like a weight, and Lark wasn't ready to burn the house down just yet. She offered a soft smile instead. "You're very kind, Captain. Perhaps we could talk more after the holidays." Cowardly, yes, but it gave her time. That night, back in her room, Lark quietly began gathering what she needed. The practical things came first: wool layers, sturdy boots, her thickest cloak. Then came the harder choices. What mementos could she bring? What memories would she risk? Her mother's locket. A poetry book from her father. The worn little sketchbook where she'd tried to capture the desert horizons she'd once glimpsed with Tazim. She settled on a single bag. Anything more would draw attention. She tucked it at the back of her wardrobe and added to it in small pieces, careful not to leave any sudden gaps for the servants to notice. As the dinner party drew near, Madra took command of the household like a general in battle, rehearsing the menu, debating seating charts, controlling every detail. Through it all, her eyes rarely left her daughter. "You've been different since the winter ball," she said one evening as they went over the guest list. "Distant. Are you unwell?" "I'm fine, Mama." "Captain Varnell seems quite taken with you," Madra said, tone clipped but careful. "Your father and I think he's an excellent match. Strong family, respectable future." "I'm sure he is." Madra placed her hand gently over Lark's, her expression softening just slightly. "I know you think me harsh, Lark. Controlling. But everything I do is for your future, your safety. You're 21 now. It's time to make real choices." A knot of guilt twisted in Lark's chest. Her mother wasn't a monster, just a woman chained by fear, shaped by rules she'd never dared question. But that didn't change the truth. "I know, Mama," Lark said quietly. "I am thinking about my future." More than Madra could ever imagine. The third morning came cold and clear. That night's party would be grand. 24 guests, courses of fine food, music, dancing. Perfect cover for a girl to disappear. Lark moved through the day like a ghost in her own home, helping with final touches, greeting guests with practiced ease. She wore the sapphire silk gown her mother had chosen, the one that made her eyes gleam like ice. Nona dressed her hair, added rouge to her cheeks, looped pearls around her throat. Lark stared at her reflection. A stranger looked back. "You look beautiful, Nina," Nona said gently. But there was something in her eyes, something that said she knew. When the sun dipped low, the party roared to life. Music swirled, laughter filled the halls, Spiced wine flowed like rivers. Lark smiled, played the charming hostess, danced and nodded and twirled, with Rig ever near, offering his arm, his compliments, his intentions. But her heart? It was already riding fast toward the foothills, toward Tazim. As always, Silas Thistle looked mighty pleased, already calculating the social advantages of such a match, like counting poker chips at a saloon table. But as the party wore on into the night, Lark Thistle felt time begin to drag, like molasses in winter. Each breath, each glance, stretched longer than the last. This wasn't just another evening in a grand house. It was her last night here. Her final hours as the daughter of Maudra and Silas Thistle. The last time she'd walk these polished floors, surrounded by crystal glasses, silver platters, and careful expectations. She studied faces with quiet intensity. Her mother's sharp, calculating eyes, her father's rigid posture, the way candlelight shimmered off the chandelier like frozen starlight. These people had shaped her, for better or worse. And now she was about to leave it all behind, like a snake, shedding its skin. Near midnight, with the guests packed into the ballroom and music spilling down the hallways, Lark slipped away. No one noticed. No one ever did. Not really. She moved like a whisper through the shadowed corridors, reached her room, changed swiftly into her riding gear, and grabbed the hidden bag from the back of her wardrobe. Down in the darkened kitchen, Nona stood by the door, waiting. Their eyes met, and neither spoke for a long heartbeat. Then Nona stepped forward and pressed a wrapped bundle into her hands. "Food for the trail," she murmured. Then added something heavier, a small leather pouch. Lark opened it. Coins, a lot of them. "Nona, I can't." "You can, and you will." Nona's voice broke with emotion. "I've watched you in this house, Nina, and whatever's out there waiting for you, it's got to be better than what's kept you caged in here. Go. Find your happiness. That's all I want for you." Lark threw her arms around the woman and held on tight, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Thank you for everything." And then she was gone, out into the night, her boots crunching over frost-kissed gravel, her heart pounding louder than the music behind her. Duchess stood saddled and ready. Lark climbed onto her, hands shaking, breath ragged. She was really doing this. No turning back. As she rode away from Santa Fe, the warm glow of lanterns and laughter dimmed behind her like the last flicker of a dying fire. Something cracked open in her chest. A wild flood of fear, joy, grief, and something fiercer still. She was scared. But she was free. She was choosing love over comfort, truth over tradition. And when the old mission ruins rose from the mist in the pre-dawn light, and she saw Tazim's figure waiting, still as stone, her breath caught. He stepped toward her as she dismounted, his eyes never leaving hers. And when they embraced, it wasn't a moment of hesitation. It was home. "You came," he whispered again, as if the miracle hadn't sunk in. "I'll always come," she said, voice steady. "Wherever you are, that's where I belong." And with the first light of day breaking over the New Mexico ridges, they rode north together, leaving the world behind and heading toward whatever lay ahead. What mattered was that they were together. They rode hard for 2 straight days, never stopping near towns, always cutting through wild country. Tazim knew the back trails, the ones hidden by rockfall, shaded by canyon cliffs, too rough for patrols to follow. They spoke little, not from distance but from urgency. They knew what discovery would mean. On the second night, they camped in a box canyon by a quiet spring. Lark ached from head to toe, but she never said a word. She moved with quiet competence, unsaddling Duchess and tending to her like an old hand. Tazim watched, pride burning deep in his chest. "You haven't lost your touch," he said, watching her tie the mare near a patch of good grass. Lark gave him her first real smile since the escape. "Some things stick with you, though I'll admit, I'm discovering muscles I forgot existed." They built a modest fire, just enough for light. They shared the food Nona had packed. Bread, jerky, cheese, nothing fancy, but it tasted like freedom. "Tell me about these 4 years," Lark said as they sat close, shoulders touching. "Where did you go? What happened?" Tazem was quiet, staring into the flames for a long while. "After you left," he began slowly, "I wandered. Never stayed long anywhere. Couldn't. I tried to return to my people, but..." He trailed off, jaw tight. "But what?" she asked gently. "Most of them are gone," Tazem said, his voice low and ragged. "Taken by sickness, by hunger, by soldiers. The few who remain, they're scattered like dust in the wind, hiding out in the mountains, clinging to scraps of land that shrink a little more every season." Lark reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. He didn't stop talking. "My sister's kids," he went on, barely above a whisper. "I found them in some mission, half-starved. They'd been told not to speak our tongue. And when they looked at me, they didn't even know who I was." Her grip tightened, tears burning behind her eyes. "Tazem, I'm so sorry." "I tried to help," he said, shaking his head. "Traded skins for supplies, brought food when I could, but it felt like trying to stop a flood with a tin cup. Everything was slipping away, the land, the old stories, the way we lived. And I was just standing there watching it die." "Is that why you came to Santa Fe?" she asked, voice soft. Were you looking for me?" He turned, eyes dark and fire-lit. "I told myself I was just passing through, looking for work, trading. But yeah, I think I was looking for you. Even though I knew I shouldn't. Even though I'd spent 4 years trying to forget. I needed to see you. One last time. Just to know you were safe. That maybe you were happy." "I wasn't," Lark said quietly, resting her head on his shoulder. "I tried. I smiled when I had to, danced when they asked. Let my mother dress me up and parade me in front of every decent bachelor in town. But it all felt hollow, like I was watching someone else live my life, because the real me, she was still out there, somewhere in the desert. With you." They fell into a long silence, only the crackle of fire and the whisper of canyon wind between them. Then Tazem spoke again, quieter this time, heavy with warning. "You need to know something, Lark. The folks chasing us, it ain't just your kinfolk hoping to drag their daughter home. There are bounty men who've seen my face, men who'd trade me in for coin without blinking. And there are soldiers who don't care who I am, only that I'm Apache. We can't stay in New Mexico territory. We've got to keep heading west." "Where?" she asked. No fear in her voice, only curiosity. "California, maybe. There's places out there. Little towns tucked into the valleys. Places where folks mind their own business. Maybe we could start over, build something." He paused, then added in a quiet, torn voice. "But it won't be easy. We'll be strangers everywhere. Folks'll talk. They'll whisper. They'll see you as broken, and me as the savage who stole you." "Let them," Lark said, her voice burning with fire. "Let them talk all they want. We know the truth. That's all that matters." But even as she spoke it, something flickered behind Tazem's eyes. Doubt. Guilt. Was he being selfish? Letting her throw away everything she'd ever known for a life of dust and danger? She was brave, yes, but also raised in comfort. What would happen when the dream wore thin? When the real struggle of it all settled in? As if she could see every question churning inside him, Lark turned and faced him fully. "Stop it," she said, firm and clear. "Stop waiting for me to change my mind. I won't. I chose this. I chose you. Every day of those 4 miserable years I spent doing what others wanted. I never stopped wishing I'd run when I had the chance. But I've got that chance now. This. She swept her hand toward the canyon, the fire, the starlit sky. This is the first thing that's felt real in years, and I want it. I want you. Tazem pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I love you, he whispered. More than I've got words for, in your language or mine. Ioanoshni, she replied, careful and clear, the Apache words soft on her tongue. I love you beyond words. He pulled back, searching her face in the flickering light. You remembered. I remember everything, she said, tracing the edge of his jaw with trembling fingers. Every story you told, every word you taught me, every breath we shared. It's all still here. She pressed a hand over her heart. It never left. He kissed her then, long and deep, a kiss that reclaimed time and silence and pain, and she kissed him back with just as much fire. They'd held back until now, always careful, always watching the trail. But in this hidden place, wrapped in night and stars, caution burned away into hunger. They made love on his blanket by the fire, rediscovering each other in touches and whispers, in the language of hands and hearts. It was familiar and new all at once. A rhythm they'd always known, but deeper now, anchored by everything they'd lost and found again. Later, tangled together beneath the stars, Lark whispered into the stillness. We're going to make it. And for the first time in years, she truly believed it. We'll make a life, I know it, Tazem said, holding Lark tighter, trying to smother the gnawing fear that kept creeping in, whispers of everything that could go wrong. Sleep now, he murmured into her hair. We've got a long ride ahead. But sleep didn't come easy. Long after Lark's breathing turned steady and deep beside him, Tazem lay awake, eyes fixed on the wheel of stars above, ears tuned to the hush and rustle of canyon night. And then he heard it. Hoofbeats, distant but closing. He was on his feet in a flash, hand gripping the rifle before his mind even finished the thought. His eyes swept the canyon rim. Lark, up. Now. His voice was urgent but steady. She blinked awake, instincts taking over like they'd been carved into her bones. 4 years in town hadn't dulled the edge he'd helped sharpen. How many? She whispered. Can't say yet, but we're not waiting to find out. He was already moving, saddling the horses fast and clean, no wasted motion. They had the camp broken in minutes, not a trace left behind. And then a voice echoed through the canyon. Adeline Moore, we know you're here. Come out quiet, no one gets hurt. Lark froze. Her face turned pale. That's Captain Varnell, she said, voice like a cracked reed in wind. Tazem's jaw clenched hard. Of course it is. That self-righteous peacock, trying to win points with your father. How many men does he ride with? Military type. Likely 4 or 5, she said. Can you shoot? I'm rusty, but yes. He handed her his spare pistol. She checked the load with hands that only trembled a little. What's the plan? We run. There's a narrow side canyon 1/2 mile west. Too tight for a group on horseback. If we make it there, we buy some time. Varnell's voice called out again, closer now. Your father wants you home, Miss Moore. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Too late for that, Lark muttered, swinging up onto Duchess. She looked to Tazem, eyes clear and full of fire. I'm ready. They broke from cover at a full gallop, ducking low over the horses' necks. Behind them, the canyon erupted with shouts and pounding hooves. Tazem glanced back. 5 riders, Varnell and 4 soldiers, all armed, all trained. The narrow canyon appeared ahead like a jagged scar in the rock wall. Tazem drove his mount straight into it, trusting his gut and the horse beneath him. He heard Lark right behind, then the angry echo of pursuit halting at the pinch. But it wasn't a dead end. Tazem had scouted this ground days before, preparing for just this moment. The trail climbed, steep, winding, treacherous, but it led to a high mesa, open and wide, with a view for miles in every direction. They pulled up at the top, horses blowing hard, sweat steaming off their flanks. Below, Varnell and his men were inching single file through the narrow pass, slowed to a crawl. "That'll stall 'em some," Lark said, calm despite the run. "Not for long," Tazem replied, eyes scanning the horizon. "There's a trading post 20 miles west, run by a man who doesn't ask questions. We can resupply, maybe swap for fresh horses, but we've got to keep moving." They set off again, pushing the pace but not breaking the animals. A dead horse didn't outrun anybody. The land stretched out wide and wild, red rock cliffs, endless sky, and even in the danger, Tazem felt something like joy rise in his chest. This was home. This was where his blood ran sure. And Lark. She belonged here too. She rode like she was born to it. No hesitation. No fuss. She read the land, followed his lead without a word, never slowing him down. The girl from society teas and corseted dances was gone. This was the woman he'd met under desert stars 4 years back. Fierce, capable, and damn near unbreakable. By mid-afternoon, they reached the post. A handful of rough buildings huddled against the wind. The kind of place that looked one good storm away from vanishing. The man who ran it stepped out, face weathered like old leather, beard streaked with gray. Caleb, half mountain man, half youth by marriage. "Tazem," he said, nodding slow. "Been a while, and I see you've brought company." "We need supplies," Tazem said without preamble. "And I need to know, any patrols nearby?" Caleb's sharp eyes flicked to Lark, took in the cut of her dress, the proud set of her shoulders, the way she stood near Tazem like she wasn't going anywhere. His face didn't change, but he saw everything. Something shifted in Oben Cross's eyes. Maybe it was understanding, or maybe pity. "Word's travelin'," he said, voice low. "Back in the settlements, folks are talking. Girl gone missing from Santa Fe, high society type. Big reward offered." He paused. "Rumor is, she was taken by an Apache warrior." "She wasn't taken," Lark said, voice steady and sharp. "I left of my own will." Oben looked at her long and hard, like he was measuring the truth in her bones. Then he gave a slow nod, like she'd passed some invisible test. "That makes it worse, girl," he said. "They can stomach a kidnapping. It fits the tale they like to tell about us being savages. But a white woman choosing to go with one of us?" He shook his head. "That rattles their world to the core. They'll hunt you harder for that." The words dropped heavy between them. Tazem had always known it, but hearing it out loud made the danger feel carved in stone. "We're heading west. California," Tazem said. "Can you outfit us?" "I can," Oben replied, already moving toward his store. "But you've got maybe half a day's head start on 'em, and if it's military after you, they ain't gonna quit easy." He waved them in. "What you need is to vanish. Shift direction. Confuse the trail." "How?" Lark asked, staying close to Tazem. "There's a wagon train fixin' to leave near Fort Garland. Missionaries, some settler families, all headed for California. If you can blend in with them, ride along quiet, it might buy you time." He started pulling goods from the shelves: jerky, cartridges, blankets, hard biscuits. "Now, they might not take kindly to," he gestured vaguely between them, "your arrangement." "We'll manage," Tazem said, voice firm. How much do we owe you? Oben named a fair price, and Tazem paid without blinking. As they packed up, Oben paused, then said in a quieter tone, My wife's people, the youth, they got a saying, the heart don't know borders. You two, what you got is real. I can see it in the way you stand. But real don't mean easy, and it sure don't mean safe. His eyes met Tazem's. You'll be tested. What you feel now, it's love, no doubt. But the question's not whether you love each other. It's whether that love's enough when the world wants to tear it apart. It will be, Lark said, voice calm and fierce. It has to be. Oben softened. Then let me tell you one more thing. About 100 miles northwest, there's a valley my wife's kin used to winter in. Hidden, good water, plenty of game. No one goes near it anymore. If you're ever in deep trouble, go there. Hole up. Wait the storm out. He knelt and scratched a rough map into the dirt with a stick. Tazem memorized every line. They rode out with full saddlebags and a new direction. Fort Garland was 3 days' ride, and they'd have to loop wide to stay ahead of their hunters. But they had a plan now. A thread of hope. As the sun dipped low, Lark reached over and caught Tazem's hand. He looked sideways. No regrets? He asked. Not a single one, she said, eyes gleaming. This is what living feels like. I'd almost forgotten. Somewhere behind them, Rig Varnell and his soldiers were still hunting shadows. Ahead, the land opened wide and wild, unknown, dangerous. But Lark and Tazem rode side by side, fingers entwined, hearts anchored in each other. And for now, that was enough. The next 3 days blurred past in a storm of dust and silence. They rode hard, slept light, and always kept one eye on the horizon. Once they spotted the patrol riding the ridge at sunset, black shapes against a bloody sky. Another time, they had to crawl into a ravine and wait breathless as boots and hooves passed not 10 yards away. Each time, Lark's heart thundered, sure they'd hear it. But Tazem's steady calm grounded her. At last, on the third dusk, Fort Garland rose on the horizon. Just like Oben said, 15 wagons, families bustling, missionaries checking lists, wheels creaking, mules braying. A westbound dream ready to roll. Lark's stomach knotted, not with fear, but nerves. What do we say to them? She asked as they watched from a ridge. Mostly the truth, Tazem answered, dismounting. You're Lark Thistle. That's true. I'm your guide, hired to see you safe to California. My parents? Dead, he said gently, raising a hand before she could speak. As far as they know, you're a young widow chasing a new life. And us? She asked softly, eyes searching his. They'll see what we are. Best they think we married before leaving Santa Fe. His voice went quiet. If that's not something you're ready to claim... It's not a lie, Lark said, cutting him off. It's true in every way that counts, Lark said softly. We may not have stood before a preacher, but I don't need no sermon to know I belong to you. A flicker of something wild and possessive sparked in Tazem's dark eyes. He gave a curt nod. Then let's go meet our new trail partners. The wagon train's master was a barrel-chested man with weather-beaten skin and a heavy brow. He went by the name Dent Marlowe and looked them over with the squint of a man who trusted nothing at first glance. Awful late in the season to be joining up, he muttered, and traveling light from the looks of it. We had trouble on the trail, Lark said, letting a slight tremble touch her voice. Though, truthfully, her nerves were real enough. Bandits hit our wagon. We barely got away with our lives. My husband saved what little he could, but we lost near everything. The lie wove itself easy. Too easy. Because pieces of it were true. They had been attacked, just not recently. Dent's expression softened some. Sorry to hear it, ma'am. These are dangerous roads these days. He turned to Tazem, eyes narrowing. You Apache? In part, Tazem said calmly. My father was a trader. I know these lands well enough to keep us out of trouble. Dent chewed at his tobacco, considering. We've got a missionary family, the Flints, lost their guide to fever just last week. They're desperate to make California for the mountain snow traps them in. You willing to lead their wagon in exchange for your passage? Done, Tazem said without hesitation. Good, Dent grunted. We pull out at first light. One last thing. His eyes sharpened. I run a clean train. No drinking, no brawling, no troublemakers. Everyone pulls their weight. That clear? Crystal, Lark assured him. As they walked away from the center of camp, Lark let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. That went smoother than I thought. Don't ease up yet, Tazem warned. They'll be watching. Any slip, any crack in our story, and we're done. He wasn't wrong. Over the next few days, as the wagon train loaded up and prepared to move west, Lark felt eyes on her at every turn. Ezra Flint, the Reverend, and his wife Dela were polite but cautious. Their 3 children kept close, eyeing Tazem with a mixture of curiosity and unease. Other families were friendlier, but always with a layer of unspoken questions behind their smiles. One evening, as the women prepared the evening meal, Della Flint leaned close beside the fire. Such a sorrow. Losing your parents so young, she murmured, and then marrying so soon after. Your husband seems unusual. He's strong. He's capable, Lark replied carefully. He's the only one who's ever truly kept me safe. That's what matters. Of course. But Dela's eyes lingered, doubtful. It's just, he's quiet. Too quiet. And watchful. Makes the other women uneasy. He's careful because he has to be, Lark said, her voice steel beneath silk. This land doesn't forgive mistakes. I trust him with my life, and in time, I hope others will see why. Every conversation felt like walking a tightrope, but slowly things began to shift. At first, the Flint children wouldn't go near Tazem, but after a few days, curiosity won out. He taught them how to look for water signs on dry hillsides, how to follow animal prints, how to whistle through a blade of grass. And when little Rye Flint, just 5 years old, wandered too far into the scrub and got lost as dusk fell, it was Tazem who found him, calm and unshaken, and carried the crying boy back to his frantic mother and father. Something changed after that. Not all the way. There were still whispers, still wary glances, but the sharp edge of suspicion dulled. Folks stopped watching quite so close. You're good with him, Lark said one night under the stars, curled beneath their wagon bedrolls. Kids don't see enemies, Tazem murmured, his arm pulling her close. They just see folks. Grown-ups could learn a thing or two. 2 weeks into the journey, it happened. A dust-covered cavalry scout rode into camp at high noon, his horse lathered and his eyes sharp. Lark and Tazem watched from behind a wagon, every muscle tight as bowstring. He went straight to Dent Marlowe. Looking for someone, the scout announced, loud enough for most of camp to hear. A girl from Santa Fe's gone missing. Lark Thistle, 21, blonde hair, green eyes. The moment she spotted the cavalry scout holding a paper, what could only be a wanted poster, Lark Thistle felt her heart seize. Standing beside her, Tazem went deathly still, his hand ghosting toward the knife at his belt. Dent Marlowe shook his head at the scout. Ain't seen no one matching that description, he said bluntly. We got mostly families here, couples looking to start fresh out west. The scout held up the poster. Lark didn't need to see the print to know whose face was on it. There's a good bounty offered for any word, the scout said. We'll keep an eye out, Dent answered, his tone clipped. But like I told you, nobody here fits. Now if you'll excuse me, we got a train to run." The scout gave one last scan of the camp, then turned his horse and rode off into the dust. Only when he was gone did Lark realize she'd been holding her breath. She turned to Tazem, voice low. "He didn't give us away." "Not yet," he muttered, jaw tight. "But now folks know there's coin to be made. That changes things." He was right. That evening, whispers returned like ghosts in the night. Eyes lingered too long. Conversations hushed when Lark passed. They were connecting the dots. The sudden appearance, their lack of possessions, Tazem's heritage, the way they always looked to the horizon like they expected someone to ride in after them. That night, Reverend Ezra Flint approached their fire. His face was troubled but not angry. "May I speak with you both?" Lark and Tazem exchanged a silent look. This was it. "Of course," Lark said gently, motioning for him to sit. Ezra lowered himself beside the flames, the orange glow playing across his lined features. "I'm going to ask just once, and I want the truth. Are you running from something?" A heavy silence fell. Then Lark nodded. Her voice didn't waver. "Yes." "Did this man kidnap you?" She reached for Tazem's hand. "No. He saved me. 4 years ago, he pulled me from the edge of death. And just recently, when I couldn't take the life my folks were pushing on me, he saved me again. By letting me choose." Ezra looked at them both, and Lark saw something shift in his eyes. "You love him?" "With everything I've got," she answered, steady and sure. "I know what folks'll say. I know what it looks like. But I also know what's in my heart, and I'm not ashamed of it." Ezra was quiet for a while. Then he let out a breath and rubbed the dust from his hands. "My wife thinks I'm a fool," he said. "Thinks I'm putting our children at risk by not turning you in. Maybe she's right, but I've seen how you two move through this world. I've seen how he treats my kids, gentle, patient, good." He stood. "I ain't saying a word, but you best know there's others whispering. When we reach California, you'd be wise to part ways with the train, for your sake and ours." "Thank you," Tazem said quietly, "for your kindness, and for not judging." After Ezra walked away, they sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. "We can't stay here much longer," Tazem said at last. "It's not safe, for them or for us." "Where do we go?" He looked at her, serious. "Remember what Oben Cross said about that hidden valley up north? Might be time to disappear a while. Let the search go cold." "Winter in the wild?" she asked. "It'll be hard. No comforts. Might not see another soul for months." "I don't need comfort," Lark whispered, squeezing his hand. "I need you. That's enough." 3 days later, before dawn broke the horizon, they slipped away. 2 horses, a handful of supplies, a note left by Lark for the Flints, "Thank you. May the Lord guide your path." Then they turned north, toward that hidden valley, toward a winter unknown, toward a life that was truly theirs. Snowflakes began falling as they rode. Light, gentle things that caught in Lark's golden hair and melted against her cheeks. She turned to Tazem. He met her gaze. And even with danger behind and hardship ahead, they smiled. Because they were free, because they were together. And somehow they both knew. That was enough. The valley was just as Oben Cross had described. A secret cradle tucked between jagged ridges, with pine forests thick enough to hide in, and a stream that ran even when frost bit the land. They arrived just as the deep snows came. Tazem found a stone outcrop and began turning it into shelter. Lark worked beside him every hour. In 2 weeks, they had a real home. They sealed the gaps with mud and pine needles, built a chimney of stacked rock, stretched hides across the front to block the wind. It was harsh labor. Lark's hands blistered and her arms ached, but she had never felt more alive. One evening, as they sat beside the fire eating roasted rabbit, Tazem looked at her. "You're smiling." Lark leaned back, her eyes reflecting the flames. "Guess I finally found what I was looking for. I'm always smiling when I'm around you," Lark said, her voice soft. Tazem tilted his head, studying her face in the firelight. "No, this feels different. You look content, like your soul finally stopped running." She thought about that, then nodded slowly. "I think I am. Sounds crazy, right? We're holed up in a rock shelter, dodging the law, with winter breathing down our necks. But none of it scares me, because I'm right where I want to be. With the only person I ever wanted to be with." Tazem drew her close, his arm around her as they watched the fire flicker shadows across the stone walls. Outside, snow kept falling, soft and steady, cloaking the hidden valley in white. Days slipped into a quiet rhythm. Tazem hunted and trapped, bringing in venison, rabbit, and fur. Lark learned to cure hides, smoke meat, sew clothing from sinew and deerskin. They gathered pine nuts, dried sage and mint, smoked fish from the stream. It wasn't just surviving, they were building something real. And when the cold set in deep, they shared stories. Tazem taught her more of his language, stories of his people, of honor, spirit, and loss. Lark read aloud from the one book she'd brought, her grandmother Hester's old poetry collection, the pages worn but loved. They spoke for hours, sometimes about nothing at all, just learning each other all over again. What they never had time to do 4 years ago, they were doing now. And in the safety of that stone shelter, under firs and firelight, they loved each other freely, often, deeply, without apology. Out here, no one could tell them they didn't belong together. They did belong. One evening, with her fingers tracing quiet shapes on his chest, Lark whispered, "I want to marry you." Tazem froze beneath her touch. "I know we can't have a church wedding. No preacher would do it. No courthouse would recognize it. But I don't care. We can make our own vows, out here, where it's just us, and the land, and the stars. I want to stand beside you and claim you as my husband, in every way that counts." He turned to her, firelight flickering in his eyes. "You sure? Because once I speak those words, once we make that promise, I'm holding you to it, for life." "I'm counting on it." She cupped his face, her thumbs brushing his cheekbones. "I love you, Tazem. I want the world to know. Even if that world is just this valley. I chose you, and you chose me. That's all I need." He kissed her, slow and fierce. When he pulled back, his voice was thick. "Ayo anoshni shinijani shikis," he whispered in his native tongue. "I love you beyond words, my beautiful one. My wife." 3 mornings later, on the dawn of the winter solstice, they held their ceremony. It was just them. No audience but the land, the snow-covered pines, the frost-laced stream, the solemn mountains standing guard. Tazem wore his finest buckskin, and he'd made Lark a soft doeskin dress, sewn by hand and decorated with beadwork he'd been crafting for weeks. Her hair flowed loose, with tiny white berries he'd gathered threaded in. As the sun crested the ridge and spilled golden light across the valley, they stood together, hand in hand, and spoke their vows. Tazem spoke first, his voice ringing strong in Apache. Then he translated, looking straight into her eyes. "I take you as my wife. I vow to protect you, to honor you in all things, to walk beside you through joy and through trial, to build a life with you wherever that road leads. You are my heart, my home, my reason. Everything I am, everything I have, it's yours, Always. Lark's voice trembled, but her eyes never left his. I take you as my husband. I promise to trust you, to stand beside you, to love you with every breath I have. I'll share in your burdens and your triumphs. You are my freedom, my truth, my home, and everything I am, now and always, I give to you. There were no rings, no signatures, just the wind, the trees, and the silence of the valley bearing witness. But in that moment, under the open sky, they became husband and wife, and it was more sacred than any church could have ever offered. They didn't have rings, so Tazim took thin strips of leather and braided them into simple bands. Their hands trembled as they slid them onto each other's fingers. Then, solemnly, he pulled out a knife, made a small slice in his palm, then in hers, and pressed their hands together, skin to skin, blood to blood. One blood, he said quietly. One life, bound, forever. Forever, Lark echoed, her voice catching. They sealed their vows with a kiss, the taste of salt and silent promises lingering on their lips. And when they made love that morning, wrapped in warmth as snow drifted outside their mountain shelter, it was no longer as lovers hiding from the world, but as husband and wife in the truest sense. Winter took hold, fierce and silent. The valley turned into a forgotten world, untouched and pure. No visitors, no noise from beyond. Just them. For 3 long months they lived in that hidden corner of the earth where nothing else mattered. And in that silence, Lark flourished. Her body grew strong. Her hands, once soft and clumsy, became steady and skilled. She could read tracks in snow like pages in a book. She sensed weather shifts before the clouds even rolled in. She moved through the woods with a grace that nearly matched Tazim's. But more than all that, she found peace. The kind she'd never known. No one told her how to behave. No one dictated what she should want or who she ought to be. Here, she was wild, free, entirely herself. You're thinking too loud again, Tazim teased one evening as they patched up their gear by the fire. I'm just thinking how strange life is, Lark murmured, stitching up a rip in his hunting shirt. 4 years ago, if you'd told me I'd be happiest living in a cave with a man the world said I shouldn't love, I'd have thought you were insane. She glanced around their rough little home. But this is everything I didn't even know I was missing. No regrets? He asked, same as he always did. Just one. She paused, needle still in hand. That I didn't choose this sooner, that I wasted so much time pretending to be someone else. You weren't ready back then. Neither was I. Tazim put aside the coat he'd been mending and pulled her into his lap. We had to grow into who we are now. You had to learn that comfort without joy is just another kind of cage, he said, brushing her hair back. And I had to learn that loving someone doesn't make you weak. It makes survival worth it. She smiled, leaned in, and kissed him slow. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise, he smirked. You're just finally listening. She laughed, gave him a playful slap on the arm. He caught her hand and didn't let go. Stitching could wait. He carried her to their bed of furs and blankets and showed her again how deep love could go when it had no walls left to climb. But late winter brought a thaw, and with it, an unexpected visitor. They were outside, Tazim checking traps, Lark gathering firewood, when the crunch of hooves broke the stillness. They froze. Instinct kicked in, hands to weapons, eyes on the trees. A lone rider appeared from the pines, hands raised in peace. It took Lark a moment to recognize him. Oban Cross, the old traitor who'd once helped them escape. Easy, the man called out. It's just me. Figured I'd see if you two made it through the cold. They kept their guard up until he dismounted. He gave them both a long look, noting the healthy glow in their cheeks, the neatness of their shelter, the quiet ease between them. "Well," Oben said, settling near the fire and taking the coffee Lark offered, "you two did better than most would have up here." "We're not most folks," Tazem replied flatly. "What brings you this far, Oben? You carrying news?" "Some." He warmed his hands over the mug. "Figured you'd want to know. The search for you. It's gone quiet. Rig Varnell gave up a while back. Got recalled to active duty." Lark's chest tightened. "Your father, Silas, kept at it a while longer. But winter shut things down. Word is he's finally given up. Either thinks you're dead, or so far off the map it don't matter anymore." A storm of relief and sorrow hit her at once, guilt twisting with peace. "And Madra?" she asked. Oben hesitated, sipped the coffee. "Can't say for sure. But rumor is, she's telling folks you were killed in a bandit raid. Probably easier than admitting her daughter ran off with—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. He cast a knowing glance toward Tazem. "Well, with someone her folks would rather not name. Saves face, you know how it is." "So, we're free?" Lark asked, her voice barely above a whisper, afraid to believe it. Oben Cross gave a small shake of his head. "Free's a funny word," he said. "Ain't nobody out hunting you anymore, that's true. But don't go thinking you can ride into Santa Fe like nothing happened. Folks still remember your face." He tilted his chin toward Tazem. "And his bloodline won't ever stop stirring trouble for the wrong kind of people. You'd be wise to stick with your California plan. Find a place where your past don't follow." "We will," Tazem said calmly. "Once the snow melts, we'll make our way west. No rush." Oben nodded, clearly approving. "Smart. Stock up, take it slow." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small leather pouch, tossing it to Tazem. "Here. Payment from that fur deal last fall, plus a little something extra. Call it a wedding present." Lark's eyes widened. "How did you—" Oben grinned, weathered and wise. "Been alive long enough to spot two people bound to each other. You wear it like a second skin." He pointed between them. "The way y'all move, like you share one breath. The way you speak for each other, that ain't lust or chance. That's a bond. Wedding or not, that's marriage." They shared a look, quiet and full. They sat with Oben a while longer, trading news. He spoke of conflicts brewing with other tribes, of cities growing restless, and the endless wave of settlers pushing west like a tide that couldn't be stopped. When Oben finally stood and mounted his horse, his expression turned grave. "Same thing I said last time. This world don't treat folks like you kindly. Hell, it don't treat anybody fair." He tugged his reins. "But fairness don't build a life. You want that? You build it yourself. Find the ones who see past your name, your blood, and hold on to them tight. 'Cause in the end, that's all that counts." As he disappeared into the timberline, Tazem and Lark stood side by side, the silence between them deep and calm. "California?" she said quietly. "A fresh start." "Scared?" he asked. She paused, thought about it. A year ago, that word would have curled up in her gut like ice. Fear of rejection, fear of starving, fear of failing. But now? With this man beside her? "No," she said clearly. "Not anymore. I'm ready. Ready to build something real, a home, a life." She looked at him, a light blush warming her cheeks. "Maybe even a family someday." She hesitated, but her voice didn't falter. "I want all of it with you, Tazem. Land, children, the growing old part too." His arms slid around her waist, his voice rough but steady. "Then that's what we'll have. I swear it, Lark. I'll build you a life so rich, you won't remember the pain that came before. We'll find our place in this world, and we'll be happy. So damn happy it'll all feel worth it." As spring crept back into the valley, they began preparing for the long road ahead. They packed slow, choosing carefully what to bring and what to leave behind. Tazem met Oben again during one of his rounds, trading more furs for supplies and a second horse, a strong chestnut mare built for hauling gear. When the day came to leave, Lark Thistle stood at the mouth of their winter shelter, her breath misting in the cold morning air. For one last time, she looked out over the valley that had cradled them through the harshest season of their lives. "Thank you," she whispered, not just to the land, but to whatever unseen spirits had kept watch. "Thank you for giving us refuge, for giving us the time to become who we were meant to be." Snow began to fall again as they rode out. One final spring storm brushing the earth in white lace, and as the flakes tangled in Tazem's dark hair, Lark's mind wandered back to that night in Santa Fe, when she danced beneath the falling snow and looked up to find his eyes fixed on her. Everything since that night had been winding toward this moment, side by side, bound in love, heading west into the unknown, married in spirit if not by law, ready for whatever came next. The road to California wasn't easy. Lark never expected it to be. But after what they'd survived, she knew they could face anything as long as they had each other. It took 6 weeks to cross the distance. They traveled with care, steering wide of settlements when they could, only entering towns or trading posts when they had no choice. Wherever they stopped, they introduced themselves as husband and wife headed west, leaving out the parts that might invite suspicion or trouble. Most folks they met didn't look too closely. The frontier was filled with people fleeing their pasts, chasing second chances. Lark and Tazem were just 2 more shadows moving west with the sun. But not every stop was kind. There was the shopkeeper who pretended not to see Tazem, speaking only to Lark, as though her husband were invisible. The mother who clutched her children close when Tazem walked by, as if he carried some silent threat. The saloon drunks who spat cruel words about savage men, and the white women who shamed themselves for them. Each insult landed like a lash, and Lark felt them all, but Tazem bore them in silence, steady, dignified, never letting their ignorance pull him into something worse. "Their poison's not ours to swallow," he told her one night. "We know who we are. That's what counts." By late spring, they crossed into California territory. Wildflowers blanketed the hills. Green life burst from every crevice. They rode north through the Central Valley, searching, not just for shelter, but for a place they could truly belong. Not too far from town, they'd need to trade, but not too close either. They needed space, quiet, privacy. They found it in a tucked-away hollow nearly 30 miles from the nearest settlement. A narrow creek ran through it. The soil was rich, shaded by pine, and there, nestled in a stand of trees, was a weathered old cabin, half caved in, but still standing, left behind by someone who'd given up. Now it was theirs. No one around to question how a white woman and an Apache man came to share a roof. No one to care. They set to work that summer, Tazem's hands building, Lark's will driving them both forward. Together they patched the cabin, sealed the leaks, shored up the beams. They cleared land for planting, sowed rows of seeds bought on their last town stop. Tazem raised a barn with his own labor, started trapping and hunting again. They struck quiet trade with the distant town. It was grueling work, but good. And every evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed their land in gold, Lark would lean against him and whisper, "We built this." She'd rest her head on his shoulder. "It's ours." "Ours," he'd say softly. "No one can take it away." By the time the heat of summer wrapped around them, their homestead was real. The garden bore fruit. The chickens laid. The cow gave milk. The cabin stood strong. They'd even made peace with a few nearby settlers, hardy folks more focused on surviving than judging. Then, one morning, Lark woke with a strange feeling. Not illness, just different. She'd missed her courses, but blamed the hard labor, the long road, the strain of making a life from nothing. But now, her body was changing, quiet signs she couldn't ignore. She placed her hand on her stomach, and knew. She was with child. She sat on the edge of their bed, her palm resting gently on her still flat belly, a storm of feelings rising inside her, joy tangled with fear, awe chasing doubt. A child. They were going to have a child. Across the room, Tazim stepped away from the wash basin, hair damp, shirt hanging open at the collar. "You all right?" he asked, eyes narrowing. "You look pale." Lark looked up at him. This man she loved deeper than anything she'd ever known, and the truth spilled out of her lips in a rush. "I'm pregnant. We're gonna have a baby." He stopped cold. Shock swept over his face, then disbelief, and finally a bright, breathless joy. "Are you serious?" "I am," she said, laughing through a sudden catch in her throat. "I think I'm about 3 months. Tazim, we're going to be parents." In 2 strides, he was across the room, gathering her up in his arms as if she were spun from sugar glass. "A baby," he whispered, voice thick. "Our baby." He eased back to look at her, eyes gleaming. "Are you happy? Is this what you want?" "More than anything," she said, pressing her hand to his cheek. "I'm scared out of my mind, and thrilled, and 100 things in between. But yes, I want this. I want your children. I want a family with you. I want to raise them with all the love and safety we had to claw our way to." They clung to each other, hearts full to breaking. After a while, Tazim grew quiet. The worry returned to his brow. "We need to make sure you get the right care," he said. "There's got to be someone in town who knows what to do. Someone who can help make sure everything goes right." "There's Mrs. Chen," Lark offered. "She runs the general store, and I heard she's helped with births before." Turned out Mrs. Chen was exactly what they needed. Calm, warm, no nonsense, with children of her own and a husband who minded his business. She checked on Lark often, gave her herbs and advice, and never once raised an eyebrow about her marriage. "Baby strong," Mrs. Chen said during the 7th month, hands pressed gently to Lark's rounded belly. "Good position, good heartbeat. You do well." As Lark's stomach swelled, Tazim turned into a walking fortress. He took over the heaviest chores, cooked more, made sure she rested even when she rolled her eyes at him. "I'm pregnant, not dying," she told him one afternoon when he carried her, literally, from the garden after she spent too long pulling weeds. "You're carrying the most precious thing in my whole damn world," he replied, completely serious. "Forgive me for wanting to look after you both." What could she say to that? Winter came again, gentler in California than the hard snows of New Mexico. But they were ready. The cabin was snug and warm. The pantry shelves were full. The livestock were safe. Then one still night in late December, as soft flakes kissed the roof, Lark's labor began. It was long and brutal, just like Mrs. Chen had warned. First babies don't come easy. But the midwife made it in time, and Tazim never once left her side. He held her hand through every scream, whispered comfort in both English and Apache. Mrs. Chen had tried to suggest he step outside. "I ain't leaving my wife," he said flatly. And that was that. Just before dawn, as light crept across the snow-dusted hills, their daughter came into the world. Tiny. Perfect. loud. Mrs. Chen cleaned the baby quick and efficient, then placed her gently in Lark's waiting arms. "Healthy girl," she said with quiet satisfaction. "Strong lungs." Lark stared down at the tiny bundle. The dark hair, the wide, watchful eyes that looked too knowing for such a little thing, and something inside her cracked wide open. "She's perfect," she whispered. "Look at her, Tazem," Lark whispered. "She's perfect." Tazem, the same man who had stared death in the face without blinking, who had walked through storms of loss and loneliness most could never fathom, was crying. Openly. Without shame, he reached out, gently pressing a single finger to the tiny hand of their daughter. When her little fingers closed around his in a perfect reflex, a breath escaped him. Half gasp, half wonder. "She's Yaji?" he murmured, the Apache word falling like prayer. "Our little one, our daughter." They named her Sarah Nijoni. Sarah after Lark's grandmother, the only soul in her family who'd shown her true affection, and Nijoni for the Apache word meaning beautiful. A name that wove together two worlds, woven just like the life they were building, thread by stubborn, loving thread. The years rolled forward, slow and golden. Sarah grew into a lively, bright-eyed child with an adventurous heart and a laugh that carried through the canyon. She learned to track with her father, dig in the dirt with her mother, and run barefoot through the valley like the land itself belonged to her. She spoke both tongues, Apache and English, like they were music. 2 years after Sarah's birth came their son, Samuel Hustian, named for Tazem's father and given a name in the old tongue that meant man of wisdom. Quiet where his sister was bold, thoughtful where she was wild, Samuel carried Lark's green eyes and his father's silent strength. Their homestead flourished. Tazem's skills as a hunter and tracker earned him respect far and wide. Folks came from distant settlements to hire him, to find a missing horse or a runaway thief, or to guide wagons through treacherous mountain paths. Lark, for her part, found surprising peace in a needle and thread. Her mother, Maudra, had drilled her in sewing for the sake of society, dresses, hems, napkins. But out here, in the rougher world, Lark gave those old skills new breath. She stitched clothes that fit real bodies and repaired gear worn by life. Bit by bit, coins found their way into a tin by the stove. They found friends, too. Real ones. The Chen family grew close as kin. A Swedish couple homesteading nearby became their regular visitors, and a former army man, one who'd married a Lakota woman and knew how the world turned against folks who didn't fit its mold, offered guidance and kindness without judgment. Of course, not everything was smooth. There were still stares, still muttered slurs or slammed doors. Not everyone could see past skin or surname, but Lark and Tazem had built something solid, something rooted deep enough to survive storms. They had love. They had their children. They had land under their boots and a home full of warmth. 5 years after arriving in California, Lark stood on the porch of a house they'd built with their bare hands, expanded now with extra rooms and a real front stoop, and let herself marvel at what had become of her life. The garden bloomed with peppers, carrots, and tall stalks of corn. The barn echoed with the low sounds of cattle and the soft shuffles of pigs. Chickens strutted proudly through the yard, and from inside the cabin came the sweet sound of Sarah teaching Samuel a melody Tazem had passed down. Their little voices rose in lopsided harmony, like sunlight through leaves. "What are you thinking about?" came his voice, low and warm, as Tazem wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Everything," she said, leaning into him. "How far we've come. How different my life turned out from what I ever pictured." You wondering what your folks would say if they saw you now?" She thought about that a long moment. "I used to care if they approved, but not anymore. I've made something here that's real. It's mine, ours, and for the first time in my life, I'm someone I actually like being." He kissed the top of her head. "Good, because I wouldn't change a single damn thing. Not about you, not about us, even the hard parts, especially the hard parts. They made us." That evening, after the children had fallen asleep, Lark lit a lamp and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, weathered with time, ink smudged at the corners. "I've been writing a letter," she said softly. "To my parents, not to send. I doubt they'd even read it. But I needed to write it, to say some things." Tazem listened quietly as she read pieces aloud. "I don't expect you to understand my choices. Maybe even 1,000 years wouldn't be enough to make it make sense. But I am happy. Truly, deeply happy. Happier than I ever was in the life you mapped out for me. I have a husband who sees me as his equal, not as a prize. I have children who are safe, cherished, and free to be who they are. I have land that I've worked with my own hands, and a purpose I wake up grateful for. I'm sorry I wasn't the daughter you wanted, but I've become the woman I needed to be, and I hope one day that might be enough for peace." When she finished, Tazem reached out and took her hand. "Will you send it?" "I don't know," she said truthfully. "Maybe just writing it down was enough." She looked at him then, steady and serious. "Do you ever regret it? Me? Everything that came with choosing me?" "Not for a single heartbeat," he said, voice solid as stone. "You gave me everything, Lark. Home, family, a reason to fight and a reason to stay. You saw me when the world wanted me gone. You picked me when every voice told you not to. How could I ever regret that?" She kissed him. Quiet, sure. "We did good," she said. "Better than good." Tazem nodded, voice low. "We built something they said could never exist." He motioned quietly toward the rooms where their children slept, voices quiet in the stillness of night. "All this," he said, "exists because we dared to choose each other, because we believed that love was something worth standing up for." Later, as they lay in bed, Tazem's arm draped warm and strong across her waist, Lark stared at the wooden ceiling above and drifted back in time. She thought of that young girl dancing barefoot in the snow outside a boarding house in Santa Fe. That girl had twirled for no one but herself, aching to feel something real, anything free. That was the night she'd looked up and seen a ghost from her past standing in the shadows. And in that single heartbeat, she'd understood. She couldn't keep living a life that wasn't hers. So much had happened since then. So many trials, moments that broke and built them both. But not once, not even on the hardest days, had she regretted the road she chose. Every time she woke up beside this man, every time she looked into their children's eyes or walked the land they'd fought to call their own, she knew. With every breath in her chest, she knew. Following her heart had been the bravest and truest thing she'd ever done. "Ayu Anoshni," she whispered softly into the dark, her voice full of love. "I love you beyond words." "Ayu Anoshni Shinijoni," Tazem answered without hesitation, pulling her closer, his voice rough with affection. "I love you beyond words, my beautiful one." Outside their cabin window, snow began to fall. Soft, slow, gentle, like a prayer whispered from the heavens. It blanketed the roof, the trees, the fences, the earth they'd carved a life upon. A hush fell over their valley, pure and white. The same snow that had fallen the night they saw each other again. The same snow that bore witness to a love the world had tried to silence, yet could not kill. The same snow that would return every winter as a quiet reminder. This was where everything changed. The night an Apache warrior froze, stunned, as he saw a woman dancing wild and free. The night two shattered hearts found their way back home. To each other. At last. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening, and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths, some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us, subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories, from our hearts to yours. Thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal. Disclaimer: each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances. Although AI tools assist us in visuals, narration, and script development, the emotional tone, editing, and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.